Fine.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
Only 20 students out of 40, 50 students. Hmm. And then these 30 students will make most of the noise. This was not the learning goal. This is out of the syllabus. This is not taught to us. This is like this. This is like that. Then I will talk to you. So I have waited like 5 minutes. Shall we wait more or shall I continue?
I think we should continue.
Continue, Doctor.
Yeah,
I think
because if anybody else joins now, I will not be able to allow him to enter because I I have to switch the screen again and again. So that would be difficult. So if anybody send you a request, please tell the doctor to allow us. That will not be possible. So that is why I gave extra 5 minutes so that more student can join us. But still, I see that out of 50, I have only 20 students here. So basically, hallmarks of aging. It is just like you had discussed the hallmarks of the cancer. The same thing, more or less, we are going to discuss here some of the features of the aging. How do we have the aging? What are the factors that are involved in the aging? What are the theories that are present there? Naturally, those are also the factors. So we are going to talk about hallmarks of the aging. So let's begin. Yes, please.
Dr. Mushtaq, can you make the screen bigger?
Yes, it is big. It is big.
Okay, thank you, Doctor.
Sorry. Okay, so these are our learning objectives. If you see here, these are the learning objectives here. We will define the major theories of the aging, and some of the physiological changes that occur during the aging process, how the diet and exercise influence the aging, discuss some of the molecular mechanism, healthcare of elderly individual, discuss the potential role of calorie restriction as a possible strategy to increase the life expectancy. So these are some of the learning objectives, along with some of the hypotheses also that are there to stop the aging or to increase the life expectancy. Any of you can define the aging for me by just looking at this picture?
the cell is weak. Cell of the body.
Cell of the body is weak, okay? And
Getting older.
that is aging. That is aging. Getting older is aging. So basically, aging is it is characterized by progressive loss of physiological integrity, leading to impaired function and hence increased vulnerability to aging process. So as you go older, there is physiological changes in the cell. They become less function. They are not performing their function as they were when they were at the when we were at the young age. You have discussed about the hallmarks of the cancer, that when there is a loss in the telomeres, you have discussed that telomeres, and when the telomeres are not functioning, that means impaired function. So once there is a impaired function, that was just a one example. Once there is a impaired function of at the physiological level, what happened, we are going towards the aging process. This is a primary risk factor for major human pathology. So once you have the aging, then you will end up with some other problem, some other human pathology. For example, as you go older, the probability of having cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disorder, neurodegenerative diseases, it increases. Why? Because the cells are no longer dividing. The same cell are performing their function, and by the passage of time, those physiological functions are going to get stopped somehow. They would be lost as they do their job. So naturally the cell will end up in the aging process, and that will affect the phenotype of our body. Now, there is, if you want to study, if you want to know about the aging, there is a very good journal. It is published by this uh, group, science group. And if you want to browse this journal, you can Google it in the net, and you can see many, many theories, many, many new publications are there every week for this aging. So to explain this phenomena of aging, we need to know, or we need to differentiate two things. First thing is that, as we have said, the aging is viewed as a total process that begins at the conception. So when there is a conception, you all know what the conception is. When the ovum is fertilized by the sperm cell, that is when it gets fixed into the uterus, the aging also process, the aging process begins from there. It is not only that once you are born, then only the aging will start. It begins right at the inside, when there is a conception. Senescence is something that change in the behavior of an organism with the age, leading to a decreased power of survival and adjustment. Whereas cell remains viable, and if they are provided with the nutrients, but have they lost the ability to proliferate in response to the growth factor. Roberto, so senescence is also a type of something aging, but in this senescence, what happened is that progressively we end up having the aging process, and there is our survival power, and we are surviving to have better or good quality of life. But as we go on, our cellular process, which were good in the beginning, they would be deprived by the nutrients. And once they are deprived by the nutrients, they lost the ability to proliferate and in response to the growth factor. So they are no longer proliferating once they begins to deprived of the nutrition. And nutrition is the most important thing that would keep the cell go on, because unless the cell has the proper nutrients, you all know there is a check phase in our cell cycle. So in this check phase, if the nutrients are good, then only the cell would be and or the cell would go into the next phase for the proliferation. And similarly, these senescence cells, they also become they do not respond to the growth factor. You all know the function of the growth factor. You have discussed it, the function of a growth factor in the hallmarks of the cancer also. So the cells are no longer functioning, or they are no longer responding to the growth factor. So that will result in a senescence, and the cell will would no longer be viable after some time, and it will reflect in the phenotype of the aging. So here the two cells are shown here: pre-senescent cell, pre-senescent cell, which is has a strong mitotic signal. It is responding to everything, and then there is a change in the chromatin. It is responding to that. There is no telomeric damage in the pre-senescent cell, and the dysfunctional telomerase will not be there, and this cell will be go on surviving. But sometime at the age, as we go older and older, all these signals are no longer functioning. The cell is not responding, and what happened, this pre-senescent cell, it end up in a senescent phenotype. And what happens in the senescent phenotype is that there is arrest of the cell cycle. You all know what the cell cycle is. Growth is arrested, gene expression is altered, and apoptosis is resistant. So all these three things are going to act on the senescent cell, and then eventually it will become a senescent, and it will end up showing the effect as a phenotype. So it will no longer respond to the growth factor. It will not die also, because it is apoptotic resistant. And naturally, when it is not responding to the growth factor, that means there is a change in the gene expression also. So these are the things that would cause the cell to become a senescent.
Doctor,
Yes, please.
so the cell will have mutation in the gene expression
Yes.
and will not go under apoptosis.
Yeah.
That's called the senescent cells. Okay.
Yes, that can be one of the reason. And the other one is that there are many theories about the cell senescent. We will see that in a while. But practical or general phenomena is this, that the cell which were mature in the beginning, it is not responding to the growth. There is a change in the gene expression, it become apoptotic resistant. So all these things will make the cell senescent, and hence it will show up in the phenotype in the form of the aging in the individual. uh, the Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Please go home and see this movie. It is again about the aging process. How this is. You will enjoy this movie. I don't want to give you the whole uh, scene or whole scenario of this movie. So if you want, you can go home and see this movie, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. It was in 2008. It is a good movie. It is about the aging. What are the hallmarks of the aging? Now, in the hallmark of the aging, we have genomic instability. You all know what happens if there is genomes are not stable, they are not expressed properly. Similarly, the telomeric alteration, epigenetic alteration, and the loss of proteostasis, that is basically cell become resistant to the apoptosis. So all these things will result in aging. And these hallmarks, these four hallmarks, eventually these primary, if they all begins to prevail, what happened, there is a damage to the cell. So these primary hallmark will cause the damage to the cell. So in response to that, what happened, we have an antagonistic hallmark which will respond to the damage of these hallmark. And as a result of that, what happened, these pro responses, that is the deregulated nutrient sensing, mitochondrial dysfunction, and the cellular senescence. So all these processes will come up after there is a loss of genomic instability, telomeric alteration, epigenetic alteration, and the loss of proteostasis. So all these things will come first, and then at the cellular level, these things are going to happen. That the cell will be no longer sensing the amount of the nutrition, the mitochondrial function would be lost, and ultimately the cell will end up in a cellular process, and it will die. And that is called a cellular senescence. And after this, what happened? After these responses have been aggravated, then what happened? At the cellular level, or at the further cellular level, the phenotypic alteration of the cell would occur. That is, for you have the stem cell will be exhausted. You know, there are good number of stem cell in the bone marrow that are providing us with the red blood cell, and the red blood cell are very important for our living. So if all these things are there, they, at the end you will have the stem cells are exhausted, and at the end you have there is less communication between the cell, because this cellular or intercellular communications, once it is lost, that means the cell are not going to crosstalk with each other, and they are not going to respond. So there will be a decrease in the cellular proliferation, and as a result of that, it will end up in the phenotype in the form of the aging. So these hallmarks and these responses are all going to end up in the phenotype, which will result in aging. So we have some of the primary hallmark, and those are genomic instability, mitochondrial DNA mutation. There is a DNA specific DNA in the mitochondria, so the damage to that is almost irresistible, and it cannot be repaired. Also, similarly, telomeric loss, epigenetic drift. These are the some of the primary hallmark that are eventually and they are evident in many cases. In one of the study, what they have done is they have shown here, for example, on the x-axis you have maximum lifespan in a year, and the rate of methylation changes per year. So you see there is a good number of methylation of the DNA in mouse, monkey, and in the human. So at the in the beginning, at age of 12, 3, 4, 5. So as we go older and older, this methylation decreases progressively. You can see here there is a sharp decline of this methylation, and by this 100 year, or between 50 and 100 year, the methylation has significantly dropped from its original amount. And you can see even in the mouse, monkey, and in the human, the loss is almost same. There is no that in one of the species it is lost at the later stages, but it is there in the early stages. So in the early stages, this methylation is there, and progressively in all these three species, it is lost at the same rate. As you go on, there is a continuous fall of the methylation. So this was one of the study where they have studied these primary hallmark, that is the genomic instability, mitochondrial dysfunction, telomeric loss, epigenetic drift. So all these are the primary hallmark of the aging.
Doctor, how the methylation can affect the ages, or can
There are different. You, if you remember my first lecture, first or second lecture, where I talked about epigenetic. So this comes in the epigenetic. Methylation is the epigenetic stuff, and these methylations are going to affect the aging process, because when these genes, they are methylated, they are not responsive, they are not expressed, only unmethylated site are expressed. So methylation means as it goes lesser and lesser, there is loss of cellular expression. The physiological response is are lost. So we go into the aging process. However, there are many other things which are related to this methylation, and I showed you one journal, the Science journal. That journal is full of epigenetic drift, and you can read it more about there. Now, yes.
Can you go to the chart? But doctor, in this chart, the methylation affects the mouse more than monkey and human, right?
No,
can I say something?
because mouse is not going to live for 100 years or 50 years. So that is why it stays here. The maximum is 5 times. So but there is a sharp decrease in all of them, in the mouse also, in the monkey also, and in the human also. So at this age, after 100 years, there is a sharp decrease. Earlier, of course, it will start, but after this one, it is going to sharply decrease. Similarly, in the monkey also, at this age, it is going to sharply decrease. So this line only tells that there is a positive association between them. That is, the methylation, irrespective of the species, is there, and it is going to affect the lifespan of the individual.
And also, I think because the methylation in the mouse and monkey is higher than human.
Yes, from this, yes, that is what is shown in this graph also. That is what is shown in this graph also. That at this age, at the 4 or 5 year of age, it is in the beginning it is 100. So as we go, as the mouse gets older, there is some decrease continues, but it is so sharp that in 1 year it can happen that the mouse will die once the methylation would be decreased. So that was one of the thing, and that is not the only thing. The other things that are going to affect the aging is, for example, here in this picture A, you can see here there is exogenous damage and there are endogenous damage. Exogenous means chemical, UV radiation. These are all going to cause a DNA lesion. Similarly, the endogenous, ROS, reactive oxygen species, a replication problem or the replication error when they are accumulated, or there are some spontaneous metabolic reactions that are going to affect the DNA lesion. So all these things are going to affect the DNA lesion. What are the things that are going to be affected by this exogenous and endogenous damage? Let's start from this side. For example, here telomeric shortening can happen. There can be a mismatch repair. We have done the mismatch repair when we did the revision lecture, if you remember. And there can be a double stranded break of the DNA. There can be a spindle problem. You know, the spindle, when the cell is dividing, this there is attachment of microtubule to the spindle, and then they pull the chromosome apart. So there can be a problem with that. There can be interstand linkages. You know, the chromosome, uh, the DNA is anti-parallel. So this anti-parallel structure, they can be linked together, cross-linked together, and that can cause the aging process, or that can cause the repair pathway problem. There can be formation of these dimers that we have discussed in our mutation lecture. Similarly, there can be a base problem, again the telomeric shortening. So all these things are going to get affected by these exogenous and the endogenous, and the ultimate result is that there is a repair pathway is not so much efficient that would change or that would repair all these. Of course, all these things are not going to happen at the same time, but sometime in the year life it may happen that you may start with the spindle error problem, and you may end up with telomeric shortening. So all these things are not going to happen at the same time, but eventually what happen is there is a problem, repair pathway is impaired, and that would result in aging. Similarly, these exogenous and endogenous damage, they can also cause DNA methylation, histone modification, and the chromatin remodeling. You all know, we have studied all these three things when we had talked about the transcription, how the transcription is regulated. So these exogenous, endogenous thing, they can affect this DNA methylation, histone modification, chromatin remodeling, and as a result of that, there can be a problem with the transcription, and that means there is impaired DNA repair, or there is a chromosomal instability, and that will result in aging. So these factors, exogenous and endogenous, can play a vital role in the aging process. And directly how it is going to happen, they are going to happen, or they are going to affect basically the chromosomal problem here, or there is a problem with DNA, and that will directly affect the phenotype of the individual and hence cause the aging. So this is more or less the continuation of that. For example, the heat shock protein, the endoplasmic stress problem, or the oxidative stress. All these things are going to affect the folding of the protein. And this folding of the protein, once they are improperly folded or not properly folded, that will result in a protein which is just getting aggregated there in the cell, and that would eventually cause the aging. So these are the things that are going to affect, or these are going to repair the or remove the unfolding, or not properly folded protein. But somehow, if these are not doing their job, ultimately what happened, these unfolded protein, they are going to get accumulated in the cell, and that would result in the aging of the cell, and hence the phenotype would be disturbed. There is a very good article if you want to read more about the aging process. The title of that is Aging Affects the DNA Methylation Drift and Transcriptional Cell to Cell Variability in a Mouse Muscle Stem Cell. So if you want, you can take a screenshot of this and you can read more about this article, and you will come to know how the DNA methylation would affect the aging. It is a good article. So these are the theories of the aging, and we are going to discuss almost all of them little by little, not in so much detail, just a few words about all of them. Valuation, free radical, mitochondrial problem. We have just discussed the mitochondrial, also the free radical. We have discussed the genetic problem. We have discussed very briefly about the telomeric problem, but we are going to talk again about this problem slightly in detail. So the other theories, the program theory versus the error theory. What does that mean? The if you remember, we have discussed the apoptosis and the anti-apoptotic mechanism. So basically, these are the same thing. Program theory is what you can say, it is apoptosis. A programmed cell death is called the apoptosis. So if there is an error in that theory, that means apoptosis is not happening. We call this error theory, or if the cell does not die off, that would end up in a cancer cell. We have discussed that when we discussed the hallmark of the cancer cell. So these program theories and the error theory are going to ultimately affect the aging process. For example, the programmed senescence theory, if it is properly programmed, it will go on and that will be okay. But the endocrine theory, the immunology theory, these are all program theory that are going to go, or that are going to take us to the aging process. This is normal phenomena. So with the passage of age, as I said, when we go older and older, there is a possibility, for example, having diabetes mellitus to us. Diabetes mellitus is what is the endocrine problem. There is loss of function of the pancreas, and it does not secrete enough of the insulin. So this is a program theory, or the program theory of the aging. These three of them. What happened on the other side is that due to some other secondary problem, there are some error theories are there. There is a wear and tear theory. That means normally wear and tear is there in our body. Our intestinal cells are doing it. Our the hair follicles, they are doing it, and some other cell. But if it is going to happen at the accelerated rate, that is wear and tear is happening at the increased rate, that would eventually lead us to the aging. Similarly, rate of living theory will also, as I showed you on that graph of the three species, mouse, human, so that defines the rate of the living theory. Cross-linking theory, the free radical theory, catastrophe theory, somatic mutations theory. So all these are the error theory that are going to cause the aging process at the early stage. They are not the programmed cell theory. These are the error theory that are going to affect our phenotype in the form of the aging. Pleiotropic genes. What are the pleiotropic genes? These are the genes that are basically functioning opposite to each other. So these are the two group of gene. For instance, pro and anti-apoptotic gene. You have studied them before. What are pro-apoptotic and what are anti-apoptotic gene? Similarly, oncogene and proto-oncogene. So these are the basically those. Similarly, there are genes that are affecting the age also, with the genes that are going to take us to the aging and the genes that are going to prevent us. But eventually, as the cell would go into the senescence, and that will result in dominant of dominance of the of the aging gene, and one would end up in the aging phase. So there is a crosstalk between these them, and whether the cell will live or die, as we have discussed in the apoptotic gene theory. So there is a crosstalk between them, and if that crosstalk is somehow damaged, that would result in aging. There is a balance between the good and the one end of the life. So and it may not be good at the other end. So we do have a balance of these pleiotropic genes. That is, in the beginning we have apoptosis going on, and at the same time we have the anti-apoptotic gene. But at the end of the life, what happened? Only there is apoptotic genes are there, but the pro-apoptotic genes may not be there. So this will happen at the end of our life, and this is happening at the early life. So damage may be noticed in the later in the life. You all know that, as we have spoken just now, that the diabetes mellitus, it usually comes somewhere after 50 years of age. So and this will not show up in the early phase, unless and until it is programmed cell theory. So what is wear and tear theory? This was first. Now we are going to discuss all these theory in slightly detailed. Uh, so what is wear and tear theory? This was first proposed in 1882. Cells simply wear out over the time because of a continuous use, rather than like just like a machine. And it would seems to be refused by the fact that exercise in osteoarthritis actually makes them more functional, not less. So in this wear and tear theory, what happened when the cells are continuously performing their function? For example, the cells of our intestine, the cells of our heart, which is continuously doing their job, just like if you take a car and you start from Jeddah and you take it to the Dammam, that is going to have a very significant impact on the working of the car. So similarly, the cells are continuously doing their job, and at the end, what happened? They become lost, they become exhausted, and that would kill the cell, and it will not be able to divide. So that would result in aging. Similarly, here in the third part, would seems to be refused by the fact that exercise in osteoarthritis actually makes them more functional, not less. So, and there is anti-effect also. For example, when we are doing some sort of exercise, we are using our body part, or we are using the muscle our in at a greater amount. So what happened here is that when we use this cell, the bone cell or the muscle cell, they actually make them more functional, not less. So it is not that it is not always that when we are using something for the extraordinary time or for a long time, it is going to lose its function. But it is not going to lose, it will get more better. So that is why it is encouraged to have regular exercise also, that will make you or make your cell to perform better, uh, rather than they would or they would end up into wear and tear theory.
Excuse me, Dr. Madhar.
Yes, please.
Dr. You say when we use, for example, hand a long period of time, you say maybe this make it more weak, right?
Yes. No, no,
But
no, 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 no.
you say maybe make it more or weak. I don't understand.
No, no, no. So, for example, if you are doing a exercise, that will enable the cell to perform much better. But if you don't use a cell and you just leave it, okay, and you use it for one time for such a long time, and that would affect the cell, that would affect the wear and tear of the cell. So use continuously rather than using it for after like 1 month and then you start exercising for a long time. No, you have to do it continuously, something that would uh, that would have that would not take us to the wear and tear theory. So if you use it continuously, for example, our heart cell, it is continuously being used, it is, there is no rest for that. So that is why the heart cell, they are not dividing cells. So what happened at the end, they get so weak that there is a wear and tear theory that is going to stop the function of the cell, and eventually we are in the aging process and eventually we die. So there is a wear and tear theory, but you have to be careful when you are what you are doing and how long you are doing.
So make it less functional.
Not, my dear, like make it less functional, make it functional but in an appropriate way. For example, as I said, if
No,
you
I
are
mean,
doing,
if
if
you
you're
do
doing the exercise, if you're doing the exercise after 1 month you do the exercise for one time, that is not good. If you want to do it, if you want to do the exercise, do it daily, on a daily basis. That will not affect the cell, it will make the cell the much better. So it is going to use all the expression, all the glucose properly, so that will have a much better effect on the cell. But if you are just using it after every 1 month for one day, that is going to affect the cell.
So if you don't do exercise at all, that's better.
I did not say that also.
No, if I do 1 month per day, it's worse than I didn't do it, or what?
If you do it after 1 month for one day, that is not good. If you want to do it regularly and in a little amount. There is no need to go from Jeddah to Dammam.
Okay.
So in this stochastic theory, what happened? There is a production of free radical glycation, and the genomic instability will prevail here. In this free radical and DNA damage theory, these free radical are continuously produced or as a byproduct of the metabolism. You know what are the free radicals? Free radicals the are the molecules. They are written as a ROS, ROS, reactive oxygen species. So basically they are oxygen as well as nitrogen, but mostly they are oxygen species. So this will produce oxygen which is highly reactive oxygen. It can react to any nearby molecule, any DNA, any protein, any lipid, and that would entirely change the function of that protein, the DNA, or the lipid. So this, if these things, the free radical, they are continuously produced as a byproduct in our metabolism, but the that increase as a result of the or as a or as because of our environmental pollution, they are also produced. So in our body there is a mechanism to detoxify these free radicals. So until when we are young, this detoxification is going on very properly. But as we grow older, this detoxification would stop, and as a result of that, these free radical, they are going to damage the the physiological function of the cell. And this damage is not only because of the free radical, it is because of the increased production, because the increased production going is not being taken care by the cell, and this increased production can be a byproduct, or it can be because of the environmental pollutant can also cause the production of free radical in our body. Similarly, the increased glucose, you all know what is the consequence when there is an increased glucose in our body for a long time. That would result in diabetes. If it continuously increase, not taken care, that would result in the diabetic mellitus. And diabetic mellitus, you all know, it affects the aging, it affects the individual phenotype. So when they accumulate, they damage the cell membrane, decreasing its efficiency. When they accumulate means the ROS particle or the glucose particle. When they accumulate, they are going to damage the cell membrane, and they are going to have some there is a decrease in the efficiency of the cell, and it will go into the senescent. The body so that is what is written here. The body produces antioxidants are those things that would detoxify the free radical. Free radicals are produced and they are destroyed by the antioxidant which are there in our cell. But sometimes it happens that these antioxidants themselves, they do not function at a proper rate. So again, there is increased amount of free radical, and that would cause the damage to our many of the physiological function, or it can straight away cause our DNA damage also. So this was the stochastic theory. Free radical repair mechanism, as we have just discussed, there is a proper mechanism for that. For example, we have a cytochrome system in our body that would detoxify the free radical produced. Antioxidants are there, superoxide, dismutase, catalase. These are all the enzymes which are present in the cell or extracellular space, and even in the blood also, and they would detoxify if there is a free radical present around in the cell or in the extracellular or in our circulatory system. But once these antioxidants, they are not functioning their own, they have their own problem because of the aging process. These proteins are not functioning, basically, since these are the enzymes, so basically these are the proteins. So once these proteins are begins to have their own problem, that they do not function, they are not being they are not being expressed properly by the damage to the DNA, and then what happened, the free radical continuously increase, and that will cause the damage. Similarly, because of this free radical, the DNA repair system would also be damaged, and that would again cause the aging process. So in animal administration of antioxidants, this is what has been postulated, or what has been done by the scientists, and they have discovered that if the animals are given a proper amount of antioxidants, that would postpone the appearance of the diseases such as cardiovascular disease, for that matter diabetic also. So free radicals are also implicated in the development of the plaque associated with the Alzheimer disease. So these are the two diseases, cardiovascular disease and the Alzheimer disease. They are actually the main diseases that are causing the phenotype, or that are taking one to the aging process. So once these the cardiovascular and the Alzheimer, they begins to come up, or they begin to appear, that is going to severely affect the phenotype. So it is important that the free radical which are produced in our body, they are detoxified by the use of antioxidant or by the natural enzymes which are present in our body. So if they are not, then you can have a cardiovascular problem, or you can have the Alzheimer disease at the end of the life, or at the end of the aging, before the aging. This is what is the free this is what the free radical is look like, and these are the different types of the free radical: superoxide, hydroxyl, nitrogen oxide, hydrogen peroxide. So these are actually the free radical, and if they are there in the nearby, for example, nearby to the damage, uh, 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 nearby to the DNA, nearby to the protein, nearby to the lipid, nearby to cellular membrane, or nearby anything, they are going to damage the uh, uh, they are going to damage anything which is present in nearby. For example, here they have mentioned, for example, the DNA and the other etc. That means the protein, lipid, and other things. So ROS is not a good thing. So there should be detoxified. There should be a proper balance in the production and in the breakdown of the ROS, which is there in our body. But if that system has gone down because of the aging, you will end up, or you will go towards the aging very fast, or you will end up with having some serious diseases also can happen if there is a continuous production of ROS. So this oxidative stress, yes.
Can you go to the previous slide, please? Yes, those molecules, superoxidase, hydroxyl, what they will do? Nitrogen dioxidase.
So these are the free radical. They can damage anything.
Anything. And this. Mhm. So the ROS is type of them, or the ROS is
No, these are the types of the ROS. These are the types of the ROS.
Okay, okay. Yes, yes.
These are the types of the ROS. These are the types of the ROS. ROS is one entity, and these are the types of the ROS.
Okay.
So
That lead to damage. Yeah, I said
So-
that lead to
so yes, as I just said, so when there is an increased amount of this, when there is an increased amount of superoxide, hydroxide, nitrogen oxide, hydrogen, we call this oxidative stress. We call this oxidative stress. And this oxidative stress, if you remember, is mentioned here also. This oxidative stress is mentioned here also. You see here, oxidative stress is mentioned here also. Oxidative stress is mentioned here also, ROS. You remember this? Endogenous damage. So this is basically the oxidative stress. And these oxidative stress, as I just told you, it can damage to the mitochondria, DNA, protein processing, and the cellular metabolism will be affected eventually. So lipid peroxidation would be damaged, protein oxidation would happen, and the DNA oxidation would happen. So all these things, and all of them are important things which are required for the physiological function of the cell. So if these are damaged, then eventually you will end up, or your cell will end, or it will go to the either to the apoptosis. If not, it will go to the senescence. Now, in the oxidative stress, we also have the glycation hypothesis. What is that? Glycation hypothesis is that it is attachment of the glucose molecule to some sort of protein. For example, it can attach to the DNA. It can attach to the protein, and this would happen when there is increased amount of glucose in the blood. And when can that be? Who will tell me when can you have increased amount of glucose in the blood?
I think in
When you have mutation in gene that produce insulin.
So what is that called? Diabetes, basically, right?
yes.
Yes. So when somebody have diabetic, what happen in that? If it is uncontrolled diabetic, especially, there is increased amount of glucose, and that glucose is since it is not being used by the body. So what happen? It is going to be attached, or it is going to affect the function of the protein, and that is called the glycation, the non-enzymatic attachment of the glucose molecule. And eventually it can cause, or it can one can end up with a mutagenesis, or you can have a damage, or you can have if it is damaging some sort of DNA, that would result in mutation of the accumulation of the mutation in the DNA. So this is all because of the ROS production and the oxidative stress and increased amount of glycation or the glucose molecule in the circulatory system. So, sorry?
Doctor, when the diabetes happen,
Yes.
there aren't any enzyme bind to the glucose, right?
Can you repeat, please?
When diabetes are happen,
Hmm.
there aren't any enzymes bind to the glucose, right?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding what you
Doctor,
are trying.
I say when the diabetes
Yes, there
happens.
is a glucose molecule. Now what
Yes,
happened?
yes. No, there aren't any enzyme bind to glucose, right?
Why?
I ask you, this is true
No,
or false?
there is no such thing that the enzyme, the, the glucose would be utilized by the cell inside the cell. It is not that the glucose binds to the some enzyme. Glucose is utilized by the enzyme. So once this there is increased amount of glucose, it is going to affect the cellular metabolism. The metabolism will not be able to take care of all the glucose molecule because of the lack of insulin also, which is activating the enzyme to perform their function. So it is because of that the glucose increases, and that is going to damage or and it is going to non-enzymatically attach to some of the DNA or to protein or to lipid molecule. So anything can be glycosylated.
So if the glucose, I'm sorry, if the glucose arises in the blood and the cell cannot take it, that will affect the DNA.
It can affect the protein. It can affect the cellular membrane of the endothelium, and eventually, when the cell die, it can go inside the cell and it can affect the DNA also.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It begins with the damage to the cellular membrane. Once that is damaged, then the cell open up, and then the glucose can go inside, and it can attach to the anything.
Okay.
Now, this is what I have actually collected from a different journal, and I have prepared this picture. This is my own picture actually, and if you see here, it starts from here: the air pollution, alcohol, radiation, inadequate defense mechanism. Inadequate defense mechanism means that we do not have these enzymes, dismutase, catalase, and peroxidase, because these are performing the function of defense. It is defending us, it is defending us from the free radical. So if this defense mechanism is not properly there, or it is impaired somehow, then all these things, they are going to cause, or they are going to lead to the production of the ROS. Similarly, infection, trauma, drug consumption, smoking, metal toxicity, so all these things are going to cause a production of the ROS. And if there is a production of the ROS and all the other things are damaged, that is antioxidant system is not there, what happen? It is going to cause the oxidative stress. And if you have oxidative stress, it can affect your lungs, it can affect your vascular system, the renal system, skin, eye, gastrointestinal system, and you can have all these diseases which are written on their side can also come up if it continues to grow and grow. It means the oxidative stress. So this is actually my diagram. I have prepared this diagram by collecting the information from a different article. So you can see here, the ROS is the biggest issue in our life. If it is taken care properly, then it is possible that you may not have, or you may decrease the presence of the disease in the individual, and hence similarly the aging is one of them. And you can see here, it is written here: diabetes, AIDS, pregnancy, cancer, and at the bottom it is written here aging. So the aging would affect if there is a multi-organ failure because of the oxidative stress.
So if the ROS will cause the oxidative stress,
Yes.
And every arrow that surrounds the oxidative circle is the disease causing because of it.
Yes. So genes that affects the aging, they are called as the genetic theory, and you have a stress resistant genes. You have gene targeting the inflammation, genes that slows the basic metabolism like the insulin growth factor, overall genetic stability. So all these are the factors that are going to affect the aging process, or that are going to increase the aging process if there is a anything which is damaged in the gene. For example, these are the things that are damaged because of the loss, or and ultimately one could end up into the aging. So what is the problem here? If there is a problem with the gene, the problem is the the main problem is actually because of the gene expression. The gene expression is impaired if by somehow any factor that influence the gene, or that influence the genetic stability. The ultimate problem would be that there is gene expression is it goes improper, and the quality of the gene expression would decrease, and as a result of that, there is a accumulation of some of the mutation in the cell, and for that matter, it can happen that the gene is expressed, but there is a mutation to that, and that would result in the cell cycle, and as a result of that, there is a diminished physiological function of the cell. So basically, the genetic theory is the one that can cause many of the problem, because of there is change in their uh, expression, and as a result of that change in the gene expression, there is going to be a continuous accumulation of the defective protein or the defective RNA, and this will have some effect on the physiological function of the cell also, and ultimately it can go to senescence, and the phenotyping, the aging would come up. So many genes shown to influence the lifespan are involved in the DNA damage repair. So DNA damage repair is the most important one, and if that DNA damage is not taken care, then that would cause, it will cause a disease cell, or it can cause to the aging. For example, here, if you see here, because of this exogenous or the endogenous, there is a damage to the DNA. There is a damage to the DNA. Okay, and this damage, it can be to the mitochondrial DNA or to the nuclear DNA. And if this damage, mitochondrial damage or the nuclear DNA damage, is repaired somehow, if it is repaired, then the metabolism would be corrected, and everything is fine, there is no problem. But if this repair, nuclear DNA repair or the mitochondrial DNA, is unrepaired, you can see here, unrepaired, eventually what happens, it is going to cause some sort of pathology, and as a result of this pathology, you can have cancer, you can have the senescence, you can have the apoptotic issue, and eventually one can have some sort of serious disease. And you can see here, this is the healthy cell at the top. This is the healthy cell is shown here, the repair mechanism of the healthy cell, or the consequence of the repairing because of the exogenous or the endogenous damage. And at the bottom you can see, if there is no repair, or this repair is not taken care, you can have a disease cell, and that would cause the aging phenomena. And it is written here, up to 500,000 DNA modification events per cell per day takes place. And if these are not repaired, you can have many problems. This is aging syndrome. It is called a progeria. It is called a progeria. This is it leads to the pattern in the expression of the human gene, and as a result of that, you can see here, these are the normal individual here, and these two which are standing here, this is the cause of the progeria. In the childhood itself, their appearance is like that they are having some sort of problem, and this is called the progeria. Early aging of the individual is called the progeria. And there are two types, there are others also, but there are these are the two types that we are going to learn in a while. Before that, you can see here these two picture are of the same lady. It is the same female is shown here in the two in in the two picture here. This is when she was young, and this is when she was old. And can you guess the age of these two ladies here? Anyone can guess the age? Yes.
21 and 75.
21 and 75.
Mm.
Anybody else?
Maybe 13. Two. Okay.
So you can see here, what does the progeria do? WS, this is actually a syndrome. In next slide, I will show you what are the features of this one, WS. So you can see this is the same lady. Because of some genetic problem, she has undergone to aging process, and at the age of 48, she is looking like to have a 75, at least to Sohaib. So you can feel the effect. What does the genetic damage do to the body? So this WS here, it is written here WS, that is a Werner syndrome. Werner syndrome. So these are the two types of the progeria, or two of the syndrome you can see here. The Werner syndrome. What happens in the Werner syndrome is that there is a chromosome instability, inability to repair the DNA, increase the rate of the cancer, mutated helicase, inherited as autosomal recessive. So all these are the features that are present in the Werner syndrome. You all know what is helicase. You all know you all know, you have studied the hallmark of the cancer. You have and I have just discussed with you what happens if there is if there is inability to repair the DNA. So all of them can happen in the early age, and if it happens in the early stage of somebody's life, that is called a Werner syndrome. Same thing is shown here also. So this is also a sort of a Werner syndrome. At early age, they look like at the age of like 50 or 70 years old. Similarly, this picture also tells you the same. The other one is Hutchinson Gilford syndrome. In this one, there is a problem with the helicase. You all know what is the function of the helicase. The pattern of inheritance is uncertain in this case. Have a shorter than normal telomerase. You have discussed that even in the cancer cell, and I also just discussed what is the role of the telomerase, and I will discuss something more related to the telomerase in our forthcoming slides. Then you will more understand the function of the telomerase. So the cell undergoes go the senescence at the early stage, and it will end up, or the phenotype would be like of a progeria, that is at early age the individual look like a very old. So this is mitochondrial aging theory. What happened here in the mitochondrial aging theory? So all the ROS that that I have just discussed with you, H2O2, oxygen molecule, hydroxyl molecule, most of them are produced inside the mitochondria. This is the mitochondria. Inside the mitochondria, they are produced. You see here, ROS, reactive oxygen species, this and this one, and they are going to affect the nearby DNA. And if this nearby DNA is affected, it is going to have some severe effect on the functioning of the mitochondria. And you all know what is the importance of the mitochondria in the cell. And here they have shown here antioxidant molecule. It is the antioxidant molecule that work, or that destroy, or that scavenges the ROS, that scavenges the oxygen or the free radical which are produced. And eventually, if it can be if it if it can be taken care by the antioxidant system, there would be no more ROS production, or it would be very less, and then the mitochondria can function on its own in a proper way. But because of this ROS production, the mitochondria will not be functioning, and you all know what is the importance of the mitochondria in the cell. So this is the mitochondrial aging theory. Uh, so because of the improper functioning of the mitochondria, what happened? There is the electron transport chain. I believe you have studied the electron transport chain in your previous classes. So, and there, if there is a problem with the electron transport chain, it will cause the aging. Similarly, there is an increased ROS, and all these proteins that are there in the, or that are taking part in the apoptosis, they are going to get damaged, and as a result of that, your cell will lose its function, and that would and eventually the phenotype of the aging will come up. What is neuroendocrine theory now? In the neuroendocrine theory, in human, aging is associated with the decreased production of the hormone, amino acids, peptide, monoamines, and the enzyme. So in our CNS, many things are happening. Many of the hormones are working together. Many of the peptides, monoamines, and many of the enzymes are working together. And because of the ROS, this can it can happen that all these things can be affected one by one, or one can have the amino acid problem, the other can have the hormone problem, and somebody else can have the enzyme problem. So all these things are going to have the effect on the CNS, and one can grow older even in the early stage. That is called the neuroendocrine theory. With the age, lower neuroendocrine level results in the slower conduction of velocity, the loss of functional, and you can have, for example, as I said here also, if you see here, Alzheimer disease, for example, here, if there is a oxidative stress, if there is a oxidative stress, your CNS would be affected, and if the CNS is affected, you can have Alzheimer disease, you can have Parkinson disease, you can have strokes, you can have schizophrenia. So all these things can be present if there is a increased production of the reactive oxygen species in the body. That happens in the neuroendocrine theory. So in the immunity theory, so it does not mean that all these theories should be present in somebody's body to have the aging. It can be the presence of one or two, it can be presence of three or four, or couple of them only, not necessary that all of them, all these things are sure are to be damaged to have the aging process. For example, here, this is the immunity theory. What happened as we grow older and older, our immune system becomes suppressed. It is no longer functioning proper. So as a result of that, you can have cancer because of the defense mechanism is not there. The foreign pathogen would come up in the body, and for example, there are some bacteria that can cause the cancer. There are some viruses that can cause the cancer because of the low or there is a low, or there is a loss of the immune function in the body, and one can have the aging because of the immunosenescence. Similarly, just like that diagram that I showed you here, this is the same diagram here. Oh, the only difference is the because of the inflammation, because of some sort of infection or some sort of inflammatory diseases, all these organs can be affected. And you know, if all these organs are affected, eventually you can have the aging, and that would result in severe diseases. Metabolic theory of the aging, the same thing is which was shown here also. I will show you this picture here. You can see here there is metabolism going on, and if this metabolism is impaired because of the endogenous damage or because of the exogenous damage, or it can have both of them, or exogenous damage can also directly go to destroy the directly the DNA, or the metabolism, if there is a impaired, it can affect the DNA. And if this damage on the DNA is repaired, it is well and good. If it is not repaired, it will cause the some sort of pathology, and you can have cancer, senescence, and many other problems. That was the metabolic theory of the aging. Or now the metabolic theory of aging, with a caloric restriction. It is proposed that if you take a less amount of calorie, you have a longer lifespan. It is correct in some sort of study, but in the other it is believed that it can cause the some sort of other disease also. So both the theories are there. Both the these studies are there that can increase the lifespan, and there are some study that shows that it can decrease the lifespan also. So metabolic theory, somehow they believe it also affects the aging process. Telomere. Now this telomere, I will talk little bit detail. You have already done that in your couple of cases also, even in yesterday also, when you had discussed the hallmark of the cancer cell. So but basically, what are these telomeres? These telomeres are the end problem replication. When the DNA is being replicated at the end of the chromosome, there is not the replication does not take place properly. So what happened? There is a shortening of the end of the chromosome, and eventually, if it shortens, if it gets shorter and shorter in every replication, what happened? The end of the chromosome is damaged. It is sort of eaten up. It is no longer there, and the shortening of this chromosome will cause the aging process. So basically, this is what happened in the telomere. If, for example, let's say this is the DNA, and it is copied with the leading and the lagging strand, and at the end there is a gap left here. You can see here there is a gap left here, and it will be left here also, but it is shown only on this side. So this gap is usually filled up by the telomerase enzyme. And if this telomerase is not functioning, what happens? This would be once this DNA is copied on the next round of replication, it will get shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And that would cause the cell to enter into the senescence phase. And this whole thing is called the DNA erosion. As the DNA gets shorter and shorter, or the chromosome gets shorter and shorter, we call this DNA erosion. So these telomere are repetitive DNA sequence at the end of the human chromosome. They are basically the sequence as TTAGGG. So this is repeated after many times, and at the end, and such sequences are only present at the end of the chromosome. And this telomere is the enzyme that takes care of this short sequence at the end of the chromosome, and it keeps the end of the chromosome of the same length as of the parental DNA, as it is shown here. You can see here the dark blue here is the parental DNA, and the light blue is the newly formed DNA, and this is left to be unreplicated. It is not replicated. The replication has not finished here. So what happened when in the next round of replication, the blue one, it will become even shorter and shorter and shorter. So this is end problem replication with the DNA. So basically, the telomere is the sequence at the end of the chromosome, and the telomerase is the enzyme, or it is also a ribonucleoprotein enzyme that would not let that segment of the DNA it will not leave that segment of the DNA to be unreplicated, and telomerase is the enzyme that would take care of this gap which is left here during the replication, and it happens at the both the end. It will happen on this side also, and it will happen on this side also. So telomere is the sequence. Telomerase is the enzyme. It is a ribonucleoprotein enzyme. Remember that it is the ribonucleoprotein enzyme. Just like the ribosome, ribosome, it has a protein part and it has the RNA also. So this is the enzyme.
Doctor, what is the sequence TTAGGG?
So this is the sequence, the telomeric sequence. TAAGG. This is a sequence of the telomere. This sequence is basically present here. It's basically present here.
Every time,
Yes.
time get shorter, she remove
Yes,
the
yes.
sequence. Okay.
Yeah. So this is how it does. The telomeric function is just shown here. You have discussed it, so I'm not going to go into the detail here. You have discussed the how does the telomerase work. Basically, it elongates or it finishes the end problem replication, where, where the end of the DNA is not properly replicated. That would be taken care by this enzyme. And this telomeric theory of aging, this telomere, they must always be present in the germ cell, and of course in the cancer cell they are there, but that is the improper function. That is not a normal physiological function. But when they are there here also, and that will cause the cancer cell to grow, and it will grow very fast. Usually the cells have limited replicative lifespan. You have studied this one also. A cell which have a limited replicative lifespan, we call this Hayflick limit. Hayflick limit it was discovered in 1961 that the cell will only divide to a certain number. And this Hayflick limit does not apply to a germ cell, to a cancer cell, or to some other cell which are present in our intestine. So this Hayflick theory does not apply to this cell. So what are the physiological changes with the aging? Increase dysregulation of physiological system. Fail proper people have a high risk of poor outcome, disability, falls, motility. So as you go older and older, you have a problem with these issues. Early stage fertility can be prevented through the physical exercise and the nutrition. So as I told you before also, through proper physical activity. It's not that after 1 month you run from Jeddah to Dammam to increase your lifespan. But if you do that regularly, take a walk, that is best one. So these are some of the aging related to the CNS. As I told you before, also Alzheimer disease is the one which is which can cause the secondary issue also. For example, dementia and some other problem can also come because of the aging. The intellectual changes can impair the cognitive impairment can have in the aging as you have the Alzheimer disease. This was the last slide. If there is any question.
Excuse me,
Doctor,
Yes, please.
Doctor, okay, go ahead.
تفضل.
Why don't you write down in the chat box, both of you?
Doctor, my question didn't end this lecture about last lecture.
Sorry?
My question about last lecture, not in
What
this
is-
lecture.
What is that?
Doctor, about revision lecture.
Yes.
Doctor, I see it. I think you uploaded to us information, add information about chromosome mutation and insertion and deletion. I think
Yes.
it's right, Doctor. Doctor, can you add it because I think you deleted it. It's useful for us. If you can, please upload it. I read
Did
it, but today I want to revision. I didn't find it. It's useful for understand.
It is added. It is added now.
Thank you, Dr. Mother. Thank you for
Yes.
everything.
It is added. It has been added.
Doctor,
That lecture was of actually the last year revision lecture. Yesterday I have asked Professor Heather to correct that, and he had added the proper file.
Doctor, the oxidative stress
Yes.
is the main cause for cancer and
Oxidative
aging?
stress is a cause of not only aging, it can be a cause of many problems, not only aging. As if you see this picture, if you see this slide that I showed you, it can be a cause of many problems, not only aging. It is a cause of many problems.
Yeah, also cause for cancer.
Yes. And it is not only that only certain type of cancer. If that oxidative stress happens in, for example, liver, it will affect the liver cell. It will, if it happens mostly at a certain part of the skin, it will affect the skin. If it is in the heart, it will affect the heart. If it is in the pancreas, it will cause the diabetic. If it is in the CNS, it can cause Alzheimer, Parkinson, and so it can affect anything.
So, Doctor, can you go to the previous slide, two more previous slide for this? More previous. Yes, this enzyme.
Yes.
Catalase and perioxidase. What's the function of those?
Dismutase, catalase, and peroxidase. These are the enzymes that will destroy these oxygen radical. They will destroy them. It will be converted. For example, it can convert this superoxide radical or hydroxy radical into water molecule or to any other molecule that is not so reactive. In this form, in this ROS system, it is very reactive. It is so reactive that anything that comes nearby to it, it will convert that into abnormal to something which is not normal.
Okay.
So those enzymes are taking care of these one. They are present in our body. Dismutase, catalase, and superoxidase. They are actually present in our body. Some of them are extracellular, some are intracellular, but they are present in almost all the organs. Okay, guys, thank you very much. Only very limited number of students were here, but let me just take a look at the name.
Thank you, Dr. Muzar.
الدكتور طلع برا؟
يب طلع. عندك سؤال يا جهاد؟
عندي سؤال.
تفضل.
الحين أنا طلعت على الصلاة السلايد رقم. شفت السلايد اللي فيه خريطة الأكسيديت. بعد بكم سلايد كذا طلعت الصلاة ورجعت لقيته يشرح عن التلميذ.